All right, welcome back for another episode of the Fleet Success Show. We got a packed house this afternoon. We got all of our Fleet Success Show co-hosts, I feel like, all in one room.
Sweet.
It's a little bit dangerous.
Well.
But yeah, we figured, you guys are in town visiting clients, and it sounded like an awesome time to get everybody together and talk fleet. I always love doing these in person. It's just a little bit easier. We don't walk over each other as much. It's kind of fun. I think the banter is also a little bit faster. It's kind of, I enjoy that a lot. But today I had a topic, so I noticed one of our competitors recently announced they're sunsetting their product. Earlier this year, I guess it was late last year, we announced that we were splitting some of our product offering. And it begged the question is like, for these fleet managers, we talk about what keeps them up at night. Mm-hmm. We talk about, the ABCs of fleet management and how important it is to have a really solid FMIS. And then boom, all of a sudden your provider tells you that, hey, by the way, we're no longer going to be supporting your products as of a certain date.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? What's your first reaction when your FMIS provider tells you they're no longer going to support your product?
Beep.
Yeah, right.
The alarms go off, Josh. The alarms go off.
I'm gonna say that was the sensor kicking in.
The sensor beep, yeah.
And I think probably one of the first questions that a lot of people will have is when.
Yeah.
Right. Like how big of an emergency is this? Right. How urgently do I need to move?
Right.
Am I looking to change quickly? Right. But what else is going through your mind? And maybe ultimately that we talk about is what should they be considering? What are some of the steps they should go through, in the first 30 days, 6 months, 12 months? Let's say like in one case, one of our competitors, they're sunsetting it in summer 2025.
Okay.
And I think we're splitting our two products. So we're not sunsetting our product, but we are decoupling them by the end of 2024. Right. So it's forcing change.
Right.
For an industry that does not like change.
I think that's actually what you hit with my background in education training. The first thing I'm thinking about is gathering all the details.
Yeah.
What's going on, and then starting to put a change management plan together. Mm-hmm. Because that's, it's no different, than, I got this email from Amazon telling me how they're going to bill Prime differently.
Yeah.
Or, it's no different than that. You're going to have to cope with change.
Right.
It's just it's the way our world moves. It moves quickly, fast, and so you got to get on top of it. You can't panic. You can't regret it. You can't be immutable to it. It's gotta have to happen at some point in time.
Yeah.
You talked about maybe, searching other competitors.
Yeah.
That's other options that you can do. That's certainly an option. But even then, decoupling from one competitor to another, that's a huge change management issue.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah. Well, then that probably is a great first point, which is figure out how painful is this, like what options do you have? Are they going out of business?
Right.
Or is the product just going away?
Right.
If the product's going away, what's their alternative? Right. Is there something you can move to? And how painful is that transition?
It's extremely painful. I've moved from one product to another.
Right.
It's all about retraining people. It's
even within the same company.
Yes.
Yeah. Depending on how bad that migration can be.
We've seen that even in our own products, with some of our peripheral systems changing. It's going to be painful when that happens.
Yeah.
So, and Josh, I think one of the first questions I would have as a fleet manager is why? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And my second question is, how's this going to impact me?
Yeah.
What's going to happen to my data? What's going to happen to all my history of all these vehicles?
Yeah.
So those are the immediate questions that, from a tactical perspective, that I would be looking at as a fleet manager. And how am I going to address this? What am I going to do moving forward?
Yeah, I think once you kind of get past some of that, because I agree, those are like my intuitive reactions to it. But I do think that once you get past that, starting to think strategically, like with all things in life, every challenge is also an opportunity, and it's a great, if we're being honest, like most of the fleets we interact with, one of the things I love about our program is we have regular ongoing training. I think it's so important, and talk to a lot of fleet organizations out there. They haven't had training on their FMIS in years and years and years. So, there's just one example of, maybe you can turn it into an opportunity. I think one of the early things I would do in my change management plan is start to take stock of what features do I use? What features do I not really use? What features are, are just like the bedrock of my existence sort of a thing versus nice to haves and nots. And start to almost catalog that a little bit and take an inventory of that and And it's really a good opportunity to talk to your people too, right? Like, what are you using that maybe I never touch in my role that is actually so important, those things. And then what's neat is you look up, if you do that diligently, you kind of look up and you almost have created for yourself a needs assessment on what you do need out of software, right? And so, like you said, it's not this like other things. I mean, if you merge or if there's a reorg, and
We've seen that before,
right?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you got to use the other group software, or and you see that even within companies, right? They're using two different software. So it's actually probably more common than we realize in that sense, right? Where even though in this case we're talking about is getting triggered from a sunset happening, but in as far as in the everyday, that being forced into a new software is probably happening even more frequently than that,
Yeah.
And so, managing that, I think those are some sort of immediate thoughts.
Another thing you need to do maybe is start taking stock in your personnel that you have. I mean, this could be a multi-generational impact.
Right.
Some of the older people, they may not, like the boomers like me, they may not be as up to speed on technology, or things like that. And where you've got people like Griffin that's, up to the latest technology, that's going to be a different change impact.
Yeah.
And so you need to understand what your personnel are going to go through when you go through this process, and for me, I like change. So change for me is not a big issue. I change the furniture just so my wife trips on it, That's kind of
Feng Shui is not in Steve.
So change for me is as a non-issue. I just go, okay, well, whatever, we'll get by and make it happen. But but there is people that are very resistant to change,
Sure.
And so you have to keep them in mind when you go through this process.
Yeah.
Well, look, if we look at it in a different perspective as well, is the reason these products are being sunset or going away eventually is because evolution. I mean, we're evolving. Technology is changing. We're getting better.
Right.
So what a great opportunity for your fleet operation, Mark, like you were talking about. This is a great agent for change. This is a reason to change. This is a reason to push change and implement change with your staff. I mean, we can blame it on a new system. Hey, we're going to look at our processes. We're going to reorient ourselves. That we're going to start doing things differently, maybe better, and using the technology to support that.
Yeah, I know one of our largest clients is going through that process, and they're saying, we actually never trained our people, and they end up getting trained from somebody who didn't get trained, from somebody else. It was like 4 generations of not being trained properly, and now
practice.
It's like, hey, we're going to almost do a clean reset with the new system as we do this migration, and use that as an opportunity to improve our practices, make sure that everybody is operating out of the same playbook, because we didn't do that the first time we rolled it out.
Right.
Yeah, but I think I saw that on the NAFA forums too. Was one of the gentlemen down in Florida used as an opportunity to kind of clean up his data, which in and of itself is a massive undertaking.
It is.
Yep.
Yeah.
But because they had to convert from one system to another, maybe we should do this with our customers. We're not doing this to our customers. We're just letting them say, hey, yes or no, and then we automatically move the data over. It's very clean. But
boy, I'd love to clean up today.
We were missing an opportunity. Is forcing them to re-enter everything again. As what is the Machiavellian as that might be, right? As medieval as that torture device might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it's for your own good. A little taste of medicine.
Exactly.
Well, I could say with our consulting projects, that's been a big challenge.
Yes.
I
That's
mean,
pretty much the constant.
figure out a way to clean and scrub that data before this happens.
Yeah, that's my daily.
I really like the thought that you brought up, though, about that person's very forward thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's get past our past mistakes and let's do this one right by getting everybody trained correctly.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot throughout all of our clients. People aren't quite trained, or if somebody turns over, they bring another person in, they get trained by the person that's there that may not know what the system is really like.
For us, that kills me because we offer free training.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no excuse other than time.
There really isn't.
I don't know about anybody else, but
No, I agree with you.
that happens and it perpetuates.
Yes.
And bad practice leads to another bad practice.
Yep.
That's frankly, that's how the data gets screwed.
Well,
100%.
the worst is when there's a workaround for something that doesn't need a workaround. It's like,
wait a minute, we already have that tool.
we open up this dummy work order to charge out parts for whenever someone needs a part that's not on a vehicle. Oh, there's this thing here called the parts charge out.
How long is that? 35 years?
Exactly.
But and Griffin, you keep talking about the data, and as a fleet management analyst, you probably see the data more often than not. And you've probably seen data that's somehow survived from one system to another. Like we've been through 3 system adoptions, and yet we can't get this right.
It's a little insane, honestly.
So what would you tell people? Would you tell them to start over? Would you tell them to do the easy cut and then?
It's interesting, you know. I would, you know, start over if you can. That's always the best, honestly, because it forces you to re-review what you have already, and then, you know, go with the good and then start over brand new with the stuff that's not so great. And I don't think people realize like how bad their data is. I don't think people are purposely putting in bad data, right? It just kind of happens over time, and you know, it's easy to lose sight of it because it's not the fire that you're putting out every single day, right?
Yeah. But you're not running the reports, you're not being proactive because you're having to be reactive, right? So
Right.
stuff starts slipping. And
Yeah, you guys are touching on something though, because it's almost like data hoarding. We're data people, you know?
Yes.
And it's like, I don't want to delete this 20-year piece of data because I might need it one day, 35 years into the future. No, you know,
Someone put it in for some reason,
You know.
right?
yeah, you know, so, you know, we talk about it a little bit sometimes, you know, maybe, you know, get some flat data. This is how much cost I put into the vehicle prior to 1985, you know? Maybe a little later than that. And just, I agree with you, and be clean, you know, maybe keep some history, but don't be hoarding about it. You don't, you know, just because the truck is 15 years old doesn't mean you need to know everything to the finest detail, you know, from the day it was born, kind of a thing. So,
right.
That's the other thing too about changing platforms, changing systems, upgraded systems. New technology cleans data.
Yep.
You know, it gives you a better opportunity to keep that data more pristine.
Right.
You know, with the automatic spell checks and, you know, duplication checks and all the things that can come.
formatting and so
Yeah,
forth. Yeah.
with all the new data challenges and techniques that are being developed out there.
Right.
So I think that you need to look at it as that opportunity. You know, maybe some of this might fix some of your problems, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Going through it.
Yeah.
So,
But and workarounds that you've created because the systems were too hard to use. Because honestly, like you think about our classic platform that was essentially designed in the 70s, written in the 80s, rewritten in the 90s and 2000s, but it was still the same base code, right? And we're finally getting off of that platform and coming out with whole new technology, which, you know, Mark, you're kind of heading that process up. But it's become this, well, let's think about the process. And that new technology includes a new way of thinking about how do we skin this cat?
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And we're not necessarily doing things the way that Grandpa did them back in the 70s for UPS.
Yep.
Right.
When you talk about change, I think that's probably the biggest thing is what's, you know, why are we doing it?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, you know, is because that older technology, it's harder to maintain. It's written off of assumptions that aren't true anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
there's technology assumptions. I know that's one of our biggest things that we look at. There's decisions we made from just a pure technology standpoint back in the 80s and 90s that we're still living with today, even though the landscape of technology has completely changed and you don't have to do it that way anymore.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, heck, back when they were writing this software, like relational databases didn't even exist,
Exactly.
you know, or if they did, they were for like super high end applications.
And they took up entire buildings.
And now we've gone past relational, and now everything's like, oh, well, it's just however you want to store the data, it just gets stored.
Right.
Yeah.
well, I mean, we're on the precipice of quantum computing.
Yeah.
And when that comes out, it's going to be a huge change.
Definitely.
Yeah. Everything will get
So,
written
but
again.
I think, you know, you have the opportunity to really get in front of this. I think that's really what you need to do as a fleet person.
Yeah.
Fleet traditionally, I would say, it's kind of a static industry. At least that's the way it's been treated. But
Yes.
people need to understand that it's fast evolving now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has completely changed overnight. Just during my career, in the last 10 years, things have changed a ton. You know, and that's what we call on some of the podcasts we've done before, this perfect storm, you know, that's happening right now. So things are not going to slow down. That's
Well,
what you have to get in the back of your mind,
The
right?
technology industry has finally taken aim at the fleet industry, kind of sort
Yeah.
of thing. And so all of a sudden we're seeing that evolution. But, you know, to you know, you guys have made great points, right? It's an opportunity to train folks. It's an opportunity to rethink processes. And, you know, another thing is it's kind of along the lines of the logic we've talked about with EVs, right? Where we say, hey, use this 15 minutes of fame. For years, you haven't had the resources to replace your assets properly. And now all of a sudden, everybody's looking at your fleet and saying, here's money, go replace the fleet.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a similar opportunity here. Again, when you do that review and you think through, all right, these are the features I like and these are the features you don't like. Well, guess what? And I'm sure you would agree with this. Now's the time to tell us. Right? I mean, we're always listening, and every software company's out there listening. But you know, if you're one of our competitors' customers and you're going through this right now, boy, speak up, right? Because if they're not listening now, they're never going to listen. You know, so use that, leverage that opportunity to ask for the things you want and the things you'd like to see in the technology. again, I think most technology providers welcome that. They want that. But now's a really good time to kind of leverage your voice in all of that, and maybe see the program that you're using evolve into something that fits more your ideal kind of a thing. So,
well, and that was something I think I made really clear to our customers was, hey, this new product may not be your ideal, right? This may not be for you. We may not be for you anymore.
Right.
Take this as an opportunity to evaluate the partnership as a whole with the company.
Right.
Steve, you mentioned that changing software providers is a big enough deal. Like, even just going from one platform to another, but now you're going to add in a complexity of it's a whole new relationship.
Yep.
If you're going to switch from one company to another,
it's an even bigger step.
It's an even bigger step because of all the relationships and, is this a company you're comfortable working with?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't buy into their vision, like, take a step back and evaluate. I would say one of the biggest things that I think shifted in the last 10 years has been these new upstart other FMIS providers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're pushing the old stalwarts like us and Faster and AssetWorks to really revamp and think about things different.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are paying attention and some of us aren't, right? And I won't drop names, but if you're in this transition phase where you're having to pick a new vendor, look at the stuff they're pushing you to and ask yourself, is this something that was written in 2000 or is it something that was built in the last 5 years, right? Because one of those things is going to be built for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
And one of them is going to have to go through another transition
in 5 years.
In 5 years time,
Exactly.
right? So be thinking about this as an opportunity to move to a more modern, updated platform.
Mm-hmm.
And there are companies out there who are marketing themselves as modern fleet management platforms. Compare it and just see maybe this is an opportunity to really modernize your operations, not just change from one status quo to status quo plus one.
Yeah.
Right. Josh, I have a client right now that I'm working with, and they've been a classic user for about a decade. Very happy with the system. They know it inside and out.
Yeah.
Had no reason to move to our web product, but after we showed it to him, after we let him experience what it looked like and felt like, he is so excited now to move to the new product. He's like, oh my gosh, I can do all of this with this product, and I can report on my performance, and I can see my dashboards. He's like, sign me up. Let's go.
Yeah. And I think that some of it is you have to evaluate it. The first reaction, Steve, is like, whoa.
Yeah.
You're moving my cheese.
Right.
I don't care where you're moving it to, if it's a better place or if it's better cheese.
Right.
You moved it. I don't like that. Right. And in fleet in particular,
I think fleet managers have so much on their plate. Right now. And I think that's the first thing that happens is,
that's true.
Gosh, another thing I got to do.
Point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually one of our larger customers said that, like, oh man, like, you have no idea. We were already in the middle of a massive growth phase. And like, this was not on our bingo card for the initiatives we wanted to get done in 24, let alone 25.
Yeah.
So we, sometimes stuff happens outside of your control. It seize the moment, seize the opportunity. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to be a bigger deal for, say, government clients in the public sector than maybe the corporate sector. I mean, I've worked in both, and when I worked in the corporate sector, if we didn't change every 3 years with some kind of staffing analysis or realignment or new policies, procedures, new software, whatever, it just happens every 3 years.
Right.
In the government, they tend to be a little bit more laid back and the status quo. Yeah. And so they don't have to make those decisions. So, but if you're a very high performer in government, then you should welcome it. Yeah. Because that'll set you apart, and in the future when you're doing these kind of initiatives out there. So,
yeah. And I know part of our plan too, right, is that we're leaving our old products up and operational, with a migration path in the future. But it's been interesting having those conversations. We've had the reactions like you had, where it was like, oh man, sign me up. How fast can I move over? But we still have some of the older, holdouts, I'll call it. And not even older, actual age wise, but just, they've been around forever and they don't want to move. They don't want to move right now anyways. Right. Thankfully our clients have that option. I don't think the other competitor has that option.
No.
Sometimes you get the choice. Sometimes you don't. At some point though, like, they will have to move, right? Like, change is inevitable. It's just a matter of, do you change when you want to or when somebody else wants to?
Yeah.
So
I was just going to say, it's a lot better if you do the change rather than being forced to do the change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too. Like you mentioned, you make a good point about what else folks have going on. And right now, fleet folks are dealing with a lot of different things. And it's, honestly, at this point, technology is your tool. You're not technology's tool. It's supposed to work for you.
Yep.
So, when you do those evaluations, you should come up feeling like this is going to help me tackle those challenges. Yes, it might be a little painful just to start off because that's something new and I'm not used to it. But you really should come out of it feeling like, hey, I'm actually going to be in better position to tackle these other challenges I got going on. And if you don't feel that, well, that goes back to what you said earlier. Maybe it's not the right one for you, But I'd like to think that when you consider that so many of the challenges that fleets are facing today are caused by changes in technology, you'd like to imagine that sort of following suit and improving the technology by which you're managing that fleet is going to help you along that path. I mean, I know also I believe sincerely that the work we're doing with our program is precisely for that reason. We are trying to help solve the problems that fleets are facing today, but also anticipating the problems that fleets are going to have 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and so forth, and already lay the groundwork for helping them solve those issues as well, right?
Well, with the emphasis now on user interface and user experience, it can't help to be better in the long run if you move to that new system, because the old systems really didn't focus on that type of stuff.
Right.
I think about it.
Especially with this training talk that
user
we're
interface,
right? Yeah,
user experience. I mean, what was that back in the 70s?
Yeah.
You got what you got.
Right. It works.
Yeah.
Shut up.
I think it's green screen. There's no UI about that.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point. And it's going to actually reduce that burden on, in theory, it should reduce that burden on organizations for having to keep up with some of the training standards and all. I mean, that's certainly what we see on the consulting side is, we every time we go in and we find someone who's not leveraging data properly, almost always it's the system's fault, regardless of the system. Then you dig a little deeper. It's, well, when's the last time you took a refresher on how to use this system? 38 years ago. It's like, well, that might be the problem.
We might have found it. It's not your software. It's you.
Right. You didn't see that update that came out every 3 months?
Yeah. So, as we kind of draw to a close here, right? If you're one of these customers, maybe you're one of our customers, maybe you're one of our competitors' customers, what would be your last parting advice to them as they're facing this situation?
I would say let's go see what's out there. Let's compare systems. Let's see what the best fit is for our organization.
Okay. Steve?
I would just say embrace the change.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of my first reaction to things. Just embrace the change and try and move forward with it. That's why I like the comment you said, is because change is inevitable.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, and the way I embrace change is I just do a lot of due diligence, a lot of research, and I start putting together a plan in my head, and I start thinking, okay, I'm here. Now, how am I going to get there?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I operate. And everybody's different, I understand, but that's what I do. I just embrace it, move forward.
Yeah, I think Steve's right. Embrace it. These companies aren't sunsetting, software to a newer version for no reason, right? It's to make those upgrades. It's to make it easier for their clients. So, just embrace it. Go with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with what my colleagues have said, and I guess I'll add something I said at the start, which is, well, again, different does not mean bad. It just means different, right?
Right.
So, but I do think it's a good practice. Take stock of the things you need and the things you use, and go ahead and be a little proactive in making sure you're covered in those areas. I know for our customers, that's exactly what we're asking them to do right now, right? We're in this major push to make sure that we have everyone's bases covered across the board as much as we reasonably can. And so we want to hear that, right? And I'm sure that that makes sense. It helps us, but it also makes sense for the customer, for the fleet, right? Because now again, this is what I need to operate. This is, everything should have kind of like 4 buckets in my mind. It should be like absolutely must have, would really like to have, but the world won't end without, would really like not to have, but the world won't end with, and cannot have, and everything fits into 4 buckets. By the way, that works for software systems, relationships, and all kinds of other things.
I like how you broke the fourth wall to make
You're looking at it, Marc.
I mean, and it comes down to the confidence you have in your supplier too.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we help fleets succeed. We're not going to roll something out that doesn't help fleets succeed. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? Because that would be not only painful for our client, but us as well.
Yes.
So usually when someone rolls something out, it's for a distinct purpose to improve your life.
Right.
That's how you have to embrace that.
Yeah, I think my last parting advice, I'm going to echo Tony. This is exactly what I said on stage when we announced our forking, like our decoupling. And I have to imagine our competitor has a similar mindset, but we're the fleet success company, and if you aren't going to be successful using our product, we want you to be successful using somebody else's, because as we all know as consultants, an FMIS is the bedrock of any successful operation.
That's right.
Right. I don't care which one you're using, just use one.
Right.
Ideally, I think ours is the best, but there's some really solid ones out there, and use it as an opportunity. If you're going to be forced to change, take back the control and make the change that's exactly the one you need, that's right for your organization. And honestly, I think you'll end up at the better for it.
Right.
So, and maybe clean up your data while you're doing
Yeah,
it.
please, data, please.
I'm begging.
Everyone wins on that.
All right. Well, guys, thank you. It's been obviously, I love having you guys in office whenever we can get you. Where are you guys headed to next? NTEA, when is that?
First week of March.
Okay, so it's like right around the corner. If you guys are heading to NTEA, stop by, say hi to the guys. I think they're going to try to get maybe a little live podcast going. We'll see if we can get the technology worked out.
Right.
But at least stop by, say hi. Let us know that you're listening to the podcast.
Please.
They would love to hear it. I'd love to hear it. And until then, see you guys later.
All right.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having us.